Hello, everybody. I'm Toby Shifsky. I am Vice President of Real Estate Education at Kaplan. And today, for our Real Expert webinar, I have none other than one of my staff favorites. He comes with a wealth of experience, and I would just love to say hello, Sergio Rodriguez. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Toby. My pleasure. Good morning, students. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, right on. So if you haven't had Sergio before, let me give you a little background about Sergio. Sergio's been in the industry for 21 years, I think. I think it's been 20. It's over 20, right, Sergio?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and
20.
spent 5 years as a real estate loan officer with Bank of America and 16 years as a top producing real estate agent with Coldwell Banker. So Sergio is an active member of the National Association of Realtors with a laser focus on helping buyers and sellers, investors purchase and sell real estate. His awards include top producing listing agent and top producing agent dollar volume company wide. So real deal. Above and beyond that, I like to say, because I'm a little partial to Kaplan, Sergio has been a Kaplan real estate instructor, editor, and content developer since 2013. So 11 years going on 12 years with a focus on California real estate licensing courses. And Sergio, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, Toby.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody today, we're going to talk about working with buyers, and we're going to get a perspective from somebody who does it as a profession, somebody who is also a professional Kaplan instructor, and so we're gonna do some learning as we go along here. And but before we get into it, I want to do one thing. I want to ask a quick poll question so we know who's all on the call today, all right, or the webinar. So let's do this. One quick question. Everybody, you should see this question pop up right now for you. And it is, who's in the audience? In other words, how long have you been in real estate? If you would help us, this will help us gear our conversation. If it comes back and all of you have been in here for 10 plus years, we might get into a little deeper conversation about something that maybe a little esoteric in some ways, but generally we get a very big crowd that are people who are currently taking classes at Kaplan. And I think the same thing is happening here. You people who've been in the industry a while and you want to get more out of this, please share your comments in the text chats and help play along with everybody. And I promise you, you're going to get some golden nuggets too. So, because between both Sergio and myself, we've got over 50 years of experience in the real estate industry, and we're going to share that today. All right. Here's another thing. Whenever you do a chat in one of our webinars, everybody can see your name, so be appropriate. And then when you do the polls, those are anonymous. Nobody can see your name attached to the poll questions. And I always share the polls so that you guys can always understand and play along with us. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. I'm going to share the results. So take a look at this. We got about 50%, 53% of the people on Sergio are currently taking classes. Good for you. You guys are on it. I can tell you one super interesting thing as the people that show up for these kind of things while you're going through licensing. Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I would say you are 3 times more likely to enter the business than those who don't. Because you're engaged and you're learning about the business and you're learning about the career. Good for you. You're on the right road. Less than 3 years, some of these people, right, got in during COVID, and you're coming back for more information. Beautiful, 16%, 5% on 3 to 5 years, 4% on 5 to 10. And I love it. 12% of the people on are 10 plus years. You could probably teach this little webinar, and we want you to play along. So if you've been in for 10 years, good for you, and keep learning. All right, let's jump in. Sergio, we've got a couple questions for you. And really, the question that I think is burning on everybody's mind today as we go to talk about what's happened. We've had a big change in the marketplace. August 17th was kind of this debarkation line of it's a whole new world out there for anybody who's a realtor in the real estate business. And so, Sergio, let me just start with a quick question. What's happened? Do you think that's the biggest change, or what do you think the change is that's most important, or really what have you seen that's happened since August 17th, where the industry had to make a change in the way that buyers were being represented and the way commissions were being negotiated between the parties?
Well, I can tell you, Toby, that the antitrust lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors had 2 main claims. Number one, that we were not clear, making it clear to sellers that they had the option of how they paid the commission. So traditionally, right, sellers have paid the total commission of the transaction, both to their listing agent as well as to the buyer's agent. Now, the lawsuit states that we must make it clear to sellers that it's actually optional to pay the commission to the buyer's agent. To the listing agent, which is the agent representing them, of course, that commission will be paid, will be negotiated. But to the buyer's agent, it's actually optional. Number two, it also claimed that as agents, we were driving buyers towards properties that paid us the highest commission. So as a response to that, number one, the major change is that in the multiple listing service, Toby, the commission to the buyer's agent, which was clearly stated before, as we look for properties available to show to buyers, 636 Hartford Street is paying 2.5 commission, right? 938 Barrett Street is paying 1.5 commission. So we were able to tell what the commission, what the compensation was going to be to us as buyers agents before we even made the decision what properties to show to our clients. That is no longer the case. Multiple listing service no longer list what the commission is that we are getting paid. So in other words, the idea behind that is that now we will make decisions. We are forced to make decisions as to what properties is best for our clients, regardless of what commission we're getting paid. And that's the way we're doing business now. It's not that we're not getting paid anymore, which is a common misconception out there right now. We're still
Yeah.
getting paid our commission. It's just a matter of how we get paid. But we don't know that up front is the point.
Interesting. So just to kind of round this back up, because I think sometimes some things are so old they're new, and what I mean by that is back when I got in the business back in 1991, we were negotiating commissions with our buyers directly, and we would have to then ask the seller to pay the buyer's side of the commission. Kind of the way things are going to be going now. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. Like, how does that conversation go now these days? Because I can tell you for the last, I don't know how many months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, everybody's talked about how the commissions are going to be dropping, right? The death of the 6% commission. And you got sellers saying, I'm not paying any buyer commission. I'm just paying a listing commission. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think a lot of people who've been in the industry, especially some of those people who've been in for 10 plus years, you guys go ahead and put it in, but into the chat, what you're thinking is really happening in the market right now. But there are people that are just, I talk to them all the time. They are confused. Sellers are confused about who's going to pay a commission, because I can tell you right now, from what we're seeing, just about every buyer is still asking a seller to pay their commission to their buyer broker. Right? The process has changed by how this is happening. And clearly there's more transparency involved, but there's a certain expectation setting that is happening or not happening in the industry. And a lot of it is fighting against what people have maybe seen in the media. What do you see happening, for even on the listing side? Like, what is a listing agent having to do to set expectation in today's world? And then on the buyer side, I want to make sure we get in and talk about how that conversation goes with buyers today. But how do you see the expectation setting? Because you have to fight against, I think, what people have seen in the news.
Right. Well, this is a seminar that's focusing on the buyer side, but I will mention something on the listing side, right? So on the listing side, when we go to talk to a seller, we still want to set the right expectation and make it clear to them that we're still selling in a competitive open market, right? Which means that this property for sale is competing against other properties for sale. And it's a good idea to offer compensation to the agent bringing the buyer to the table. So, it's optional. No longer is it, this is the way it's going to be. How much do you want to offer? The question before was, how much do you want to offer the buyer's agent? Now it's kind of like, do you want to? It's making it clear to sellers that, hey, yes, you have the option of paying the buyer's agent of not. But if you don't, consider that your property will be a competitive disadvantage against those properties that are paying a buyer's agent commission, right? And on the buyer side, again, so the thought is sellers are thinking, great, I don't have to pay the commission anymore. Buyers are hearing from the media. Now I have to pay your commission. And the conversation with the buyer, of course, is listen, sellers now have the option of paying my commission or not. But I can tell you that there's ways we can work around it. That's simply an additional negotiating point that we will need to discuss with the seller that perhaps is not willing to pay a buyer's commission. But bottom line, I will do whatever possible, everything possible for two things. Number one, to find you the best property for your family, regardless of what commission it pays me. And number two, to negotiate with the seller that commission for myself. And that's it.
Right.
Yeah. Reassure them that they're not very unlikely that the buyer will have to pay us the commission.
Sure.
That's
So let's just kind of put a bow on the listing side, because I do think the listing agent is doing a disservice by not informing the seller that, hey, listen, the fact that we're not including a buyer representation commission on the listing doesn't mean they're not going to ask for it. As a matter of fact, I think any agent worth their salt is going to say, hey, listen, let's set the expectation. These homes in this area have been sold under a format, under a protocol for the last 30 years that have included a commission. If you think as a seller that all of a sudden we're going to cut a certain percentage out of the price and not pay for part of that, and that your home's going to have the same value, you're mistaken. And so understand that these values that where you think you are have been established where they are, and that we should be ready for the buyer to ask us to pay their broker's commission. And that can be a part of the purchase agreement. It's totally legal. I think you have to set that up because ultimately, in the end, the seller either wants to sell or they don't. And I've had this happen where I've had a seller say, well, I don't have to pay the commission. I said, yeah, you don't. You don't. But understand, when they ask you to pay it and you don't pay it, it is a part of the negotiation on the price of the house, right? And either they're prepared for that price on the house or they're not. And I would think in some instances there are times when you do a disservice by not making sure the seller is aware of that.
That's exactly right. And as a listing agent, that's what I tell my sellers. I say, listen, my job is to get you the highest possible price for your property. I will do the marketing necessary for that, but I also need something on your part. And that would be offering buyers agents the right compensation. So it's a combination, right? You do your part, I do my part. We will sell the property for the highest possible price. But if you refuse to pay a buyer's agent commission, I can tell you that that will be an uphill battle.
That's another consideration for if you're actually going to have as many people possible trying to buy your house. All right, so let's do this. We put a bow on the listing side, which is, hey, agents, you need as a diligent listing agent to prepare your sellers. And believe me, you work up your sellers' net proceeds, or expense sheet, estimating how much money they're going to be able to take out of their home at the end. And ultimately, my argument to a seller who fails to understand this is, listen, this is just math. And if you get the price you want, right? If you get the money out of your house that you want, does it really matter if you're paying the buyer's commission? I mean, does it? I mean, because it's really just math. Either the sale price works or it doesn't, given all the costs involved. And so I think that's a part that, and I've had to deal with more emotional side on sellers than I had to deal with it being really just about numbers and math.
Exactly.
They literally entrenched. I'm tired of realtors making money. You got to understand that does happen. There's a very few and far between because it's a very simple math calculation, but that does happen. Okay. Let's move into buyers, because what I really want to know is, how are you educating your buyers? How are you really letting them understand what the difference is in the marketplace now? Because I think this is what people want to get to, and this is what even experienced agents are stuck on. Is they're trying to understand, what do I say to my buyer when they think that they have no idea. Some of them still have no idea how this is going to get paid. They have no idea even when I have to ask them to be on a written agreement now. As a realtor, I have to get them on an agreement before I can even work for them, before I can even show them a home. So what do you say to your buyers? How do you educate them about this new world we just entered into?
I think the most important part, Toby, is just simply reassure them that the process is not changing. We will still do the best we can to find you the right property for your family, the one that meets your needs, right? And help you achieve your real estate goals, regardless of compensation. I really don't make it a big point of compensation in my conversation with buyers. It's more about, okay, this is a new form that needs to be completed, and let me explain what it is. Yeah. And what it is that basically now commission is fully negotiable. It has to be open to both sides that it is negotiable and that I do expect a certain commission. Now, the commission that I'm going to write in the form, Toby, let's say it's 3%. Why do I write 3%? Because the commission, the form needs to state what the maximum that I can, I'm sorry, the minimum. No, the maximum that I can accept.
Careful,
Yeah,
don't
I'm
limit
thinking, wait
yourself.
a
No,
minute.
don't limit yourself.
Am I talking to the seller? I'm talking to the buyer, right? No, I'm talking to the buyer, right?
Yeah, right.
So if I put down, let me give you an example. If I put down that my commission is going to be $1,000 on that form, Toby, just to get the seller to sign with me, that is the maximum.
Buyer to sign
I'm
with
sorry.
you. Buyer.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's fine.
The buyer. Just to get the buyer to sign with me, Toby, that is the maximum commission that I'm going to get. You got it? So even if the seller is offering 2%, but I put $1,000 on that form, I'm only going to get $1,000. The buyer's going to get the credit of the rest. That's why we put down 3%. Not that we expect 3%, but we expect somewhere between 3% and below. So
So just to be clear for everybody watching this, we're not recommending 3%. This isn't because here's another thing. So understand, some of you have been in the business a long time. You know that you can't talk about what your company or you charge on commissions because it could be antitrust violation, Sherman antitrust violation. So do not discuss what you charge and hey, we're all going to charge 3% or 5% or 2%. Do not do that. And so we're probably going to move away from talking about what percentages are on this webinar, just to make sure everybody's clear. So don't put anything in the chats about what you charge on commission. It's just that's bad form and it could be an antitrust violation in our industry. But understand this. I think the point you're saying is it's negotiable. And when it's negotiable, I think the difference that you're talking about, what you're seeing is before I can work with a buyer, I have to have an agreement with them. And generally, it's going to be a buyer representation agreement. Like, listen, I want to get paid. I want an exclusive right to represent you. I don't want to drag you to 40 houses and have kids dropping apple cider and pretzels in the back seat while we're showing homes and not get paid. So you're going to get all of me. And for that, you're going to agree to pay me a commission, but whatever percentage that is, or it could be flat fee. And you're going to pay me that upon successful closing of the house. Now, we can talk about how I'm going to get that money, like who's actually going to pay it, right? Because you're going to end up paying it, even if the seller agrees to increase the price of the sale price of the house in order to cover that commission. The buyer's ultimately paying it because they're putting their money in, down payment, financing, all that kind of stuff for the commission. But you're getting them on a contract. You're explaining what your duties are, and tell me how are they accepting this right now? Is it a huge blocker? Is it a treasury? What are the buyers saying to you?
not at all, Toby, because it all depends on the presentation. And of course, the reassurance we give them that this simply is an additional negotiating point. It doesn't mean that the buyer is going to pay for it. It simply means that this will be, if it comes to that, and I can tell you that in the majority of cases, it is not at this point, right? But if it comes to a negotiating point with the seller, then we will negotiate on their behalf. As their representative, that's what we do. We negotiate probably 25 different points on a contract with
Oh
the
yeah,
seller.
personal property, closing dates, rent,
Terms,
all that stuff.
very good, exactly, Toby. So this will simply be an additional negotiating point. Will you be paying me my commission? Highly, highly, highly unlikely, right? This is
Right.
just the way it's structured now, right? And of course, as your consultant, as your representative, as your agent, I will do the best I can to avoid it. Why? Because I want you to end up buying. I want to be the one that represents you in the purchase, and
Yeah.
and I want to be able to hand you the keys to your house. And that's not going to stop us.
So I want the some of the wise and veterans, people who've been in the business for a while, to kind of play along here because um, and I don't want you to share, the commission amounts in the chats or anything, but I want to ask a question of everybody as you're going, because here's what I'm seeing in my marketplace. So once again, the buyer, if they have the cash, they'll pay the commission directly to their agent. That's fine. Some buyers have the cash and the wherewithal, and it's not a big deal. But many buyers, like you said, 50, 60, 70, 80% of them will probably not have the cash to pay the commission and their down payment. So they're going to ask they're going to ask the seller in a negotiation of the purchase agreement to pay the buyer broker fee. Okay, so I think we settled this part. The thing is I have some peers, some people who've been in the business for a while, who said they are excited about buyer representation today because they feel like the handcuffs have been taken off of them. And what I mean by handcuffs is prior to August 17th, the buyer agent commission was negotiated by the listing agent. And it was generally a portion of the overall listing. Some listing agents are better than others. Some listing agents command a different fee than others. Some agents had different priorities. And now, and at that point, before August 17th, as a realtor representing a buyer, I had to accept whatever that buyer broker commission that was offered in the MLS was. I had to accept. I couldn't negotiate additional terms.
Mhm.
Well, now I've got people who are savvy, excellent agents, and they go, oh, handcuffs are off. I'm not stuck with a X% buyer broker representation fee. I'm not stuck with a 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever it is. I can negotiate my own fee. And I think I'm worth more than what I was getting paid. I'm asking those people that are on this webinar right now, is anybody negotiating an on average higher fee representing buyers right now? Or are you asking about the same? Or are you getting less? I'd love it if we could get people to throw it in the chat right now what you're seeing. And just remember that chat has your name on it. So, but I think it would be super interesting to understand what's happening in that marketplace. Because if we understand the lawsuit said sellers were being injured because they're overpaying, and I'm really wondering what's going to happen in the industry for overall commissions, because this is what we saw in the news media was that all the 6% commission was dead. And I don't know, Sergio, what are you seeing happening in your market?
You know what? I'll gotta be honest with you. We're talking a specific market, and of course, real estate is always a local market. But I can tell you that in the San Diego area of California, which is where I work, I don't see much change. I just saw a chat right now, a comment that they sold their home for 6%. The last listing I sold was for 5% total commission. And I can tell you the only reason why 6% is gone is only because we're still in a seller market. Right? So to me, it's more about market conditions than legislation. So market conditions right now just dictate that, hey, no longer the sellers have to offer 6% simply because of how many buyers are coming on the market because of the lower interest rate. Like I told you before, Toby, your timing is excellent, right? Today, and actually in about an hour and a half, what 2 p.m. Eastern time, the Federal Reserve is going to state their change in interest rates. And as expected, rates are going to go down. It's just a matter of whether they're going to go down 0.25% or 0.5%. But bottom line, like we discussed before, is that this is the beginning of a new cycle. First time in 4 years that the Federal Reserve lowers rates. What do you think is going to be the reaction of buyers? Buyers are going to jump back on the market, right? Buyers are waiting for this rate drop. And of course, lenders ahead of in expectation of that have already lowered their rates. But not only that, like we mentioned, the beginning of a cycle, which means that there'll be additional rate drops as we move forward. This means more buyers coming on the market, more of a seller's market. And of course, that just by market conditions, normal market conditions means lower commissions. but more activity, so everything evens out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said something kind of profound. And it is today could mark the start of a new cycle.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in the last 2 years, those people who've been in business, we have a lot of people who've been in it for, 2 to 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 and plus. A lot of people on there, almost 50% of the people have been in it business for a while. The last 4 years have been a interesting time in real estate where home values have gone up, but the number of transactions has gone down, right? That's a cycle. As the cycle goes, because then interest rates went up and fewer people and 7% and 8% interest rates and all that. And now we mark the tipping point, the new cycle of in interest rates, which is interest rates go down, generally transactions go up, and so we've been down in the last year, 25 to 35% in transactions compared to the previous year. And so I think you've just said something really kind of profound about today. Mark your calendars. This was the day when the new cycle started in real estate.
Yes, sir. We will see an increase in buyer activity. We will see an increase in seller activity because sellers have been in what's called a lock-in effect. Lock-in meaning that, and I'm sure from the participants that are homeowners, the vast majority are going to say they have an interest rate 6% or lower in their current mortgage. So sellers are saying, why would I sell my house where I have a 3% interest rate and buy a new one at 6%, right? So as rates go down, more buyer activity, more seller activity. You guys are coming into the market at an excellent time. Great decision, whether it was by chance or not, but this is a great time to be entering the real estate industry.
So I got a quick question for everybody out there, a poll question. So buyer representation. Now, when this all came down, through the courts and the change in buyer representation and buyers needing to negotiate with their agent directly for their fees, and for agents in order to work with somebody to have a written agreement, some states were ahead of the deal. There was 18 states in the country that had buyer representation agreements. Some states didn't. So I have a quick poll question. Does your state, or really maybe even did your state, use buyer rep agreements? Go ahead and quick answer on this one, because I'm going to follow up with another question really quick. Once again, these are anonymous, everybody. Play along. Look at, they're rolling in. Love it. Does your state currently use buyer representation agreements? Yes, no, not sure, maybe not. Some of you guys that are sitting in licensing classes, you might not know yet. To understand that. Totally get it. All right, I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, end. All right, and I'm going to share the results. There we go. Look at that. 46% said yes. So some states got on this and dropped in more. So I believe nearly every state's going to have some sort of form that's going to be approved. I know California had one kicked back by the Department of Justice. Is it in place now in California? Is there a California form?
Oh yeah, we have to use it for every transaction. The new one, the one that got approved.
Well, that got approved. Yeah, a little tricky. And this always happens, everybody. Whenever there's a regulatory change or things happen, or there's these settlement deals that changes the practices of the industry. And once again, just so everybody's clear, this is a large part of being a realtor on the residential side of the business, and so these kind of rules are governing anybody using multiple listing service and in order to keep your realtor tag. I can say one other thing though. People should understand that really those going in through licensing, only about 2/3 of all licensed agents are realtors. There's a big chunk of them who are on the commercial side and maybe don't carry a realtor or even a commercial realtor's badge. There are many people who go into property management, never going to sell a home. There are many people who go into business brokerage, all these kind of things. But about 2/3 of all licensees, so about 1.6 million people, are realtors and are going to be operating under these rules. So let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to ask the next question. And the next question I have, I don't know if I can find it here. Here we go. How about this? I'm going to go a little more personal, and this is really for those of you who are in the business and working. right? That should come up. Here we go. Has your brokerage reviewed new buyer representation agreements with you that comply with the new rules as a result of the settlement? I'm really interested. Those of you who are already working, has your brokerage already prepared and identified the appropriate forms for you to use? I've heard some stories that not all of them have, and I just wanted to make sure that kind of where we're at on this, because this is probably the slipperiest slope, is not having the right agreements in place. Not only to operate according to the kind of the settlement stuff, but also in order to secure your commission. Because I want to talk just a little bit about that agreement in a second, Sergio. Why it's so important. All right, here we go. I'm going to share the results in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And share. Look at this. So 18%, so 1 out of 5 almost. People are like, I haven't seen any buyer representation agreements. That should be a concern. You're going to probably want to go to your broker. You're going to want to say, hey, have I missed something? How are we handling this now? Some of you may not be governed by those forms. There's a big pile of non-realtors in Manhattan, New York. I think there are some lessons to learn here, though. Even though you might not be a realtor, you might not be governed by this. There's some transparency here that I think, and professionalism that I think we're going to see in the market that really bodes well for our industry. Transparency and professionalism never hurts a profession. Never hurts a profession. So I think they're looking at it. Another 1 out of 5. So almost 36%. So about a third of you say, yeah, not yet. And I think they're looking at it, though. And then 63% say, yes, we do have it. We are in place. Good for you. Know the form, because there's nothing worse than getting in front of a buyer and not knowing your own form. That's a little embarrassing. So you could review it, learn it, just like some of you sitting in licensing courses right now, learn it and know how to do it. Practice going through it. All right, let's do this. So I think we talked about it. Why would I have to get, why would an agent want to have a written buyer representation agreement? Why do you want to have that? Why is it that important, Sergio?
Well, I can tell you top of the list right now is because that's what the law requires. But beyond that, in terms of in terms of the relationship with the agent and the buyer, this is reassuring the buyer that the agent will put 100% of their effort towards finding them the right home. This is kind of saying like, hey, listen, I promise to put all the effort to help you find the right home. At the same time, you promise to work with me. When you find the right property, when I help you find the right property, and a lot of buyers right now, as you know, they're going online, right? So a lot of them are finding themselves the right property. It's kind of like you reach back to me and I'll represent you. I'll put your best interest first, and I will help you achieve your goal of buying that house. It kind of like it's an agreement, right? You're going to do this for me. I'm going to do this for you. So now we have a relationship, we have an agreement, and this is how we will move towards the goal of helping you achieve your real estate goals and objectives.
Got it. Right on, right on, right on. All right. So you made changes when working with your buyers since August 17th. And what do you think stands out? Is there anything that you made a mistake on and like you do differently now? Like I'm trying to get people up to speed faster, quicker about what this new world is. What's the pitfall? What's the trap?
Well, I can tell you that the number one thing, and you mentioned it, and somebody talked about EXP Realty regarding names don't matter, but somebody mentioned that their broker is on top of it. My recommendation is that obtain the training necessary that explains to you what the new requirements are and what the new forms are. If you're not getting it from your broker, you can get it from your local realtor association, but get that training. It's very important because these forms are now required. These forms are now the very first step in any discussion. And of course, buyers have a lot of questions about these forms. And of course, that's not something we can talk about in 5 minutes. But bottom line, I know there's a lot of resources out there. And at the same time, of course, here at Kaplan, we do offer that. We have the Real Estate Accelerator webinars. We have the buyer's agency, representation designation that you can obtain with us. This is the kind of training that you want to obtain. And it's available to you. There's different sources, your broker, local association, Kaplan, if you want to get that designation, et cetera, et cetera. But get the training, understand, and do some role plays. If the training is done correctly, there will be role plays where you will play yourself, somebody else will play the buyer, and how you're going to have that discussion.
I'm excited for everybody. You know, I'm thinking about if I could maybe just answer one of these chat questions we had. Guys, throw your questions in the chat and we'll run through a bunch of them here if you got more questions. But Brian, you said, hey, if you negotiate a 3% fee with your buyer but cannot negotiate more than 2% from the seller, that's a problem, right? You're 1% off. Does your buyer got to come up with the dough? The answer is your buyer's on a contract and has to come up with the dough. Unless you agree to take less than your contracted amount of 3%. So the goal is, how good are you at negotiating twice for your commission, once with your buyer and once with the purchase agreement with the seller, right? And you can always take less. But technically, the buyer's on the hook for that fee, technically. And if you wanted to hold them to it, you could. And if they didn't have the money to cover it or it skewed their financing, it could probably ruin a deal. You probably better be really careful if you take that path with people and make sure that you've got your I's dotted and T's crossed. But that's like anything, right? Be a professional, know your value, know your worth. So, you know, with us, and I'm looking at this in these early reports from people coming back, I think in some states where they already had buyer representation agreements, those states are a little further ahead. The conversations are pretty straightforward. And really what it comes down to is the public, the buyers themselves and the sellers. If you're in a state where there's already buyer broker agency and the buyer representation forms have been used for years, they already kind of expect this conversation about the commission. And it's really almost business as usual. And I'm in the state of Minnesota, and it's kind of business as usual for the most part. There's a little more, I think the conversation is even a little harder on the listing side to make sure you set the expectation that the seller, you're probably still going to pay the commission. Yeah, that's probably the longer conversation, but the buyers are pretty well trained. And for those states that didn't have this, there's an opportunity for you, even as a brand new agent. So you existing agents who are here and you're in the business, you know, you've got to learn a new trick. You've got to learn a new thing where new people coming into the industry, you can learn it this new way right off the bat. And you can differentiate yourself very quickly with some tools. And we do have these tools. We have a course. Sergio commented on it, the Buyer Agency Professional Designation course. It's a course you can take. It's 8 hours of on-demand video, and there's also a live online one you can take that can get it done in 2 4-hour sessions. But there's a bunch of assets in there for you, because I think telling the right story about who you are and demonstrating, here's what I do for you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and this is what I get paid and why I get paid it. So how do you do that in today's marketplace? There's a very quick learning curve that you can do to differentiate yourself. So coming out as a new agent, I would be excited about what this new change in the industry affords, because some people who've been in the industry a long time, they won't change. They are, that's why I applaud you guys who've been in the industry and you're in on this webinar. You are all about change and you're looking for golden nuggets. Well, I can tell you right now, the biggest golden nugget you need to have is you need to make sure that you can differentiate yourself in this marketplace. You understand what your value proposition is, understand the contracts you need to use in order to secure your commission, understand how you're going to have the scripts, the talking points with your buyers to work them through this, and then how to negotiate it appropriately with the seller if the seller ends up having to pay that fee. Those are going to be big things, big things. So I know I just shared the poll results. I said I would always share those polls, but pretty straightforward or along the same lines as what the answers were before. I know we got questions coming in. Go ahead, Sergio. Were you ready for any of these questions?
Yes, I'm ready. I can't read them, but if you read them to me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah. So let's do this. Here's a quick question. For the buyer agreement, does it state that the buyer will need to cover the seller commission? The seller has a signed agreement that states the agreement. I think, Angelique, that maybe you meant to say, I have a listing agreement. Was that the right one? Oh, God, they're coming in now. Hang on a second. I think I got screwed up there. For the buyer agreement, does it state that the buyer will need to cover the seller's commission? The buyer does not cover seller's commission. The buyer is only going to cover the commission for the buyer's agent. That's it, right? Seller has their own agreement with their own agent. That's what this whole lawsuit was about. Was buyer has an agreement with the buyer and seller has an agreement with seller. And really, what we're talking about here is how does that buyer need to ask the seller to pay the commission? They have to do it in the purchase agreement. That's completely legal and everywhere in the country. And so, if done right. All right. Let's see here. I have a question. If a listing is for $400,000 and the buyer gets a $450,000 mortgage, well, there's trouble there. Can the buyer use that extra $50,000 to pay additional obligations such as commissions? Generally, you can't finance as a part of a purchase the loan. And so there are limits on seller contributions towards loan amounts and down payments and all that kind of thing. But if the buyer never sees that money as a part of a negotiation of a purchase agreement, it's not an end run, but it's a different way to get paid where it doesn't skew current mortgage requirements. I can tell you this, though, and I'm not sure if it's happened yet, but there are actions moving through that may allow sellers to pay buyers' costs and as a direct result being covered by their mortgage. Very confusing topic, very confusing point, but go ahead, Sergio.
Toby, to that student, keep in mind that a lender will finance the lowest of the purchase price or the appraised value. The lenders are very conservative, right? They need to manage risk. So they'll finance the lowest of the two. So you will not, okay, there are certain loans, but those are different. But 99.9%, a lender will not finance more than the purchase price. That's the bottom line.
Got it. Got it. Sonia asked, hey, I have a buyer agreement for 2.5 with a buyer and requested 2.5 from the seller for buyer compensation, right? Seller came back at 2.25, going to nick a little ding, a little nick out of the buyer's agent, and left the buyer paying the additional 0.25%. How do you handle that after the fact that you have already made an offer if the seller doesn't agree to the compensation because your offer is based on the seller paying the compensation? So in other words, Sergio, we made an offer. And in the offer, we asked the seller to pay the commission. The seller said, all right, I'm actually going to take your offer, but I'm going to line item your commission and say, I'm only going to pay you 2.25 of the buyer's buyer broker commission and not 2.5. And now you're like, okay, what do you do now?
Right. And you know, I can tell you this, Toby. Like I said, I've been in the business 20 plus years. I've closed over $50 million in sales. And let me tell you this, and maybe this is personal, but I do not work for a commission. I do not want a specific commission for my transaction. I literally want to do what's best for my client and help them buy a property. If the commission is lower to 2.25, I'll take it, Toby. I mean, that's it. I won't even have the conversation with the buyer. So I'm sorry, I'm the wrong agent to ask that. But I don't even have a sales pitch for that because I've never had the discussion with a buyer. And you know, I mean, to win a quarter point, you know, we're talking about properties that are now worth, right, an average 500, 700,000. So, I mean, how can I go to a buyer and say, look, I'm already making 20,000. I need an additional 3,000 from you. I can't do it. I personally can't do it. Okay. So I'm not
I can tell you this, the very first transaction I did, I was asked by a contractor to do a commissionectomy. Yeah, do we all know what a commissionectomy is? That's like when they pull out your commission and they take a big piece of it right out of you, right? That's called the commissionectomy. And they did it at the closing table where we found out it was a new construction deal, and we found out they didn't have an air conditioning unit in yet. It was in Minnesota, it was over the winter, and they're like, "Oh, no, no, you bought it without the air conditioning unit," and
Oh,
asked me to give up $2,500 of the commission. And I had to sit there, and I'm like, what do I do? I'm either going to make, am I really going to blow this deal up for, 25% of my commission because it was a $10,000 commission? Was I really going to blow the deal up? You are going to be faced your entire career with decisions about where do I hold firm? Where do I say, no, you know what? We're going to have to come back and counter because I want the full 2.5%. Or do you have to have the conversation with your buyer to say, hey, listen, now they come back, but they've cut this down, so you're going to owe me that little bit? Or are you going to say, good enough, let's move on and take the deal the way it is? You are always going to be faced with those questions in real estate. And the better you are and the more you do it, the more comfortable you come with it. And your situation may change over time. A decision you make at the beginning of your career may be different 10 years in. Like Sergio is, I think you've gotten to a point, Sergio, where it's about different things for you. Go ahead. You can
and
say.
Toby, I can tell you that as a salesperson, my conversation would be geared towards something else. So I would say something like this to my buyer. Listen, I was expected to make 2.5%. Seller's cutting it down to 2.25. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. I'm glad I'm helping you buy the house in exchange so that we can consider it even. When you know somebody that wants to buy or sell, you send them to me. All right?
Yeah.
How's that? That'll be the deal. And then we're done. And you see, something along those lines.
Love it,
Just
love it,
came
love it. All right. Let's see. We got questions. I love it. Everybody's playing along in the chat. I think we got everything right here. Ernesto says you can negotiate buyer's commission with the seller off the MLS. Yeah, you actually only can negotiate the buyer's commission with the buyer. You set the fee before you even write a purchase agreement, show a house, all that kind of stuff. But you technically, Ernesto, the buyer is negotiating with the seller for the seller to pay their broker's fee at the time of purchase agreement. So we don't say it's off the MLS. We just say it's a part of the purchase agreement format. And once again, everybody, just to round this off as we're getting ready to close down here, I have one more poll question for everybody though, but some things are so old or new. This is kind of the way it was when I got in business, and it had been run for years and years and years along the same lines. It's so old, it's new. It just needs some people to become aware of what it means, people to get educated quickly so that they can transform their business. Once again, I think it's going to offer some higher level of professionalism. What we're seeing in our buyer agency professional course and designation, some of the feedback coming back from students is buyers out there are also savvy. They have more tools. They have plenty of internet to read. There's some misinformation, but Sergio, let me ask you if you think you're seeing this. But I think that there's some buyers who are even looking at the service level of an agent and saying, I might not need all your services. I only may need some of your services. I've already researched this area, or I'm going to buy my uncle's home, and I really just want somebody to run paperwork. We've seen people say, what do you charge for different services? Are you seeing that at all yet, Sergio? Like a
Not
man?
necessarily that part, Toby, but certainly the part about going online. I can tell you that 100% of buyers right now are online looking at properties themselves. And I can't tell you how many buyers. Now, I send buyers options that meet their needs, but I can't tell you how many buyers have called me and said, Sergio, I saw this property online. Can we go see it? Other than the ones that so they're the ones that are looking for the properties. And not just before, it was just like driving around. Hey, I drove past this property. I saw the sign for sale. Can we go look at it? Okay, that's fine. But now online, Zillow, Redfin, Homes.com,
Yeah.
Realtor.com. It's
Tons of
endless.
information out
It's
there.
endless. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I tell you what we're doing. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to just, I know we got a bunch of people who are very interested in how to get more education and training on this. And so I just wanted to share a couple things. And I'm going to ask one more question, because I know we have Real Estate Accelerator. A lot of people who are in licensing courses have signed up for Real Estate Accelerator. We cover some of this in Real Estate Accelerator, which is really just coaching for brand new agents, if you're brand new in the industry. But we also have the buyer agency professional, which is set up for people who are licensed to come in to learn how to compete in the buyer agency world as it is today and where it's going quickly, which means how do you create your value proposition? How do you create a stunning, a visual buyer representation agreement? Not agreement, but a presentation to kind of tells people, this is what I do for you. This is why I'm worth the money I'm worth. And then making sure you understand exactly how you secure that commission with your buyer. And if you have to, through the purchase agreement. That's what you get in the buyer agency professional course. I just want to ask one last poll question, everybody, and play along if you can. Some of you will not be interested, but are you interested in the BAP course and designation? Really keenly interested if you're interested in taking more education at some point. And you should see that up on your screen right now. Are you interested in taking the BAP designation? Once again, these are all anonymous. Just trying to get a gauge of people and where you're at in your education curve when it comes to actually taking more education. I think there's some links in the chat that have been put in by Jenna Lucas for where you can go to understand the Real Estate Accelerator and the Buyer Agency Professional. Kind of two different things. One is for initial coaching on new agents to understand that you're in the lead generation business and how you're going to set up your business. And then buyer agency professional is really all about representing buyers. So once again, I wanted to thank Sergio for coming today as we wrap up. Appreciate you very much. Appreciate all you do for Kaplan and all you've done. It's fantastic. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners and watchers. And once again, this will be recorded. It'll be sent out. You can watch it again at another time. I'm going to share the results. Look at this. Are you interested in BAP? We got 4% saying no, 37%. I need to think about it. 51%, I'm very interested. 8%, I'm ready to register now. That's fantastic. All right, so there you go. There's a little Real Estate Accelerator scan code if you want that. And then let's go this way. Buyer agency professional. There's a scan code for that. Sergio, I look to see you in more of our coaching sessions. I look to see you in the education.
Anytime.
Good luck in
Thank
your
you,
business, and we'll talk again soon.
Anytime. Thank you. Thank you, students.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon. By the way, you can go to the Kaplan community if you want to continue the conversation. We'll have our experts in there answering more questions about buyer agency and about everything that we talked about in the career real estate today. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.